Thank you, Miss Sylvia. It's always important for me to recognize the Rosh Kodesh teachings that you ladies do every single month. It's important for me to recognize Christina Middleton, who kind of spurred us on to do this. And even though she's not here in this anymore, and they're in Alaska, her family, her husband is serving there in the military. They're serving there in the military. Christina, we're still doing it, and they're doing it well. And so you have spurred us on to really good things. I want to mention a couple things and pull together, just real quick before we do the actual teaching, pull together some things that I heard today that may help you, hopefully give you something to go home with, if nothing else. So, Ms. Sylvia said that it is thought that during the time of Shavuot, all the wisdom for the year is given on one day. And you may be listening to that, and you may go like, yeah, I don't believe that. Or, yeah, that's crazy. That is part of what we call Kabbalistic thought in Judaism. So what is Kabbalah? Before everybody strokes out, what does the word Kabbalah mean? Well, we do a ceremony on Friday evenings called Kabbalat Shabbat. When you do the wine, when you do Kiddush and the bread and pray for your children, that's called Kabbalat Shabbat. That means welcoming or receiving Shabbat. In our Wednesday night temple study, I'm going to pick on you guys a little bit. Do you remember what the series, the procedures, or the halakha of the offerings? There's one section that is called something similar. Do you remember that part? It's called Kabbalah. And what is that part during the offerings? It's when they're receiving the blood of the offering in a special vessel. It's called the Kabbalah. That's a part of the process, part of the procedure of offering an animal, right? So when we talk about Kabbalah in Jewish thought, it means receiving the some of the different deeper, mysterious, hidden parts of the Torah. And again, before anybody gets all like, yeah, but that's witchcraft and blah, 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 blah. The same exact things that Kabbalah is seeking to answer are many of the things that we start young Christians out with. So if you come from a certain tradition or certain traditions, you may have this experience of like somebody gets saved, gets born again. They haven't even hardly finished praying the sinner's prayer, which is something we made up, by the way. They haven't even prayed the sinner's prayer yet, and people are already around them speaking in tongues and trying to get them receive the Holy Ghost, right? And then they're like leaving church saved, and you're telling them to prophesy and do all this kind of stuff. That's mystery. That is deep mystery. And then what do? We tell them, go read the book of John. Now, out of the 4 Gospels, John is the most mysterious of all of them. No, it's so plain and simple. No, it's really not. And then we throw young Christians into the book of Revelation because they got to know the end time. You shouldn't study Revelation until you've studied the Bible for like 30 years. And then you'll still be lost. So what I'm saying is, a lot of times we throw stones at stuff we don't understand whenever we actually do the same thing in our own tradition. And so just ask yourself, instead of being so cynical, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I know that there's some in here maybe and out there. There's some that are cynical. I get it because I am cynical. When she said that, it kind of spurred a little like, yeah, right. And I had to catch myself. And you know what? What if we stop being cynical, and what if you say, what if? What if? What if I participate in Shavuot, I recognize Shavuot, I study the mitzvot, and I read the book of Ruth, and I do whatever, and I pray, and I worship, and I honor the time of Shavuot? What if God blesses me with every wisdom that I need for the rest of the year? What if that is a thing? Is he not the God of all heaven and earth? Is he not the creator and the master? Can he do that? Yeah. Are you not his child? Are you not faithfully and with the best of intentions serving him as well as you can? Are you not able to receive all the wisdom you need for the next year? And if you say, well, no, not really, then you are your problem, not God, and not the idea that he may actually send all the wisdom in once in a year. Let me ask you this. Do you ever know the right answer but do the wrong way? Do you ever know the right way but do it the wrong way? What is that? That's you having the wisdom but not using it. So what if on Shavuot, Hashem gives you all the wisdom you need for that year and you actually do according to the wisdom you have? Imagine how next year could look so much differently than this last year did.
And the excitement the day that you receive it all.
Yeah. And just the acknowledgement that, like, hey, I may not feel anything, I may not sense anything, but you know what? I believe that God has given me all the wisdom that I need for this year. Should excite you to want to use that wisdom and be sensitive to that wisdom. Second thing I want to kind of draw together is this week's Parsha, especially the last few aliyot that Miss Denise read. There was a lot about decreeing something and it being holy. If you call something holy, it will be holy to you. And it is not to be used for any other purpose, right? That language. Now, because of the way we taught on Kedusha for several weeks, that should have rang a different bell for you. Because what did we define as kadosh, as holy? What was our working definition? It's set apart to the service of God by ritual and legal restriction. I'll say it again. Holiness is set apart for the service of God by ritual and legal restriction. One more time. Holiness means set apart for the service of God by ritual and legal restriction. There is another part of the procedure of making an offering that this relates to. Does anybody remember what it is? When you call something holy? No, not vidui. It's the part before that. It's the very first thing. It's called kedushat pei, right? The word pei meaning mouth, lips. Kedushat means to set apart, right? So it's basically to declare something as consecrated. You're saying with your mouth, this thing I am setting apart for God. Now, it hasn't been used for God yet. It hasn't been in an offering sense. It hasn't been made an offering. It hasn't been any of that. But an offering, an animal offering, has to be prepared. Not prepared like the butchering process. It has to be set apart. Why? Well, one of the main reasons is because an offering has to be presented without spot or blemish. That means that when an animal is born, you have to preserve that animal until it is of age to be offered. You have to keep it without spot or blemish. That means that you have to designate it early as you can. And then it is set apart by ritual and legal restriction and limitation, right? And so in this week's Parsha, we have all these things that God said, if you say this is consecrated, then it is consecrated. I want to try to tie that together for you. And the fact that God calls us kadosh. It doesn't mean that we have fulfilled all of the duties yet, but we have been declared. That's the declaration part. The problem is that we stop there and we go, well, I've been called holy. I'm Gucci. I'm all good. I've been called, I know I'm too old and to say that, but I said it. We say, I've been called holy. That's all I need. No. In the process of the offerings, that's the first step. It's not even an actual part of the offering itself. It's just preparing. So in God calling us kadosh, He's actually just preparing us for all of the things that are to come. It's not the end again. It's the beginning. And then we talk about Shavuot again, coming back to that, where the people are separated, right, for the 3 days. They're separated. And you cannot receive the covenant without being separated. What is separated? They are being made kadosh. They are entering a phase of kedusha there, where God says, I'm going to separate you, and I'm also going to put legal restrictions and limitations. What does that mean? How do we know? Well, because he says, if you touch the mountain, you're going to die. That's a restriction. And it's a legal thing, because if you do, it happens. It's part of that mechanism, right? And so all of these themes that kind of are together, we had great worship, partial with a lot of nitty-gritty details. Miss Sylvia gave a ton of great information, and I just wanted to kind of condense some of that for you to give you maybe something to take home and chew on. So, this week we're going to do a short and dirty summarization of the oral law as part of our intro to the oral Torah. Why are we doing this again? Because in the next couple of weeks we're actually going to start to study individual commandments in an effort to do them better. This is part of, again, if we say we are holy and we're set apart by legal restriction and limitation, what is that legal restriction and limitation? What defines that restriction and limitation? It's the Torah. The Torah is the legal covenant. It's the legal part of the contract. And so if we say we're holy, and that's the beginning of our journey, the rest of the journey is walking out that holiness and preserving and increasing that holiness. And we do that by more and more observance of the Torah and understanding its teachings. So we're going to be going through some of the commandments, basic commandments, and really looking at how to keep them better. And part of that is going to be referencing the oral law. We're going to start with the Torah, of course, because that's where everything starts, but we're going to reference the oral law as a resource. And so I want to just give you a basic rundown of kind of what it is. This is the fourth, I think, or fifth part in this of the oral law. So we talked last week about the types of writings that there are in the oral law. And you have things, maybe three major parts, three major types of writing. You have halakha, which is just this is how you walk stuff out. The Torah says this about a commandment. These are all the ways that you walk it out. That's halakha. That's in the oral law. Then you also have agadah, or agada, which is storytelling, right? It uses different forms of storytelling in order to support the halakhic part. We talked last week about reading American legal scholarly documents. I don't even know what those books are called, whatever. Legal books, I don't know. Talking about reading those things and just reading about cases and reading about law. And you think about how absolutely dry and bone-chillingly boring that would be. That would be terrible, right? Well, when we read the Mishnah, we're doing the same thing. We're just reading Israel's version, or ancient Israel's version of American law, if that makes sense. And so what the sages did is they threw in stories at different places to kind of give you a reprieve from just the oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. The dryness of it all. And then thirdly, we have midrashim. Midrashim is, you can read the Torah. This is how most of us read the Word of God, right? We read it and we want to do it exactly the way the Word says. We want to take a literal interpretation of a scripture. Midrash, it means to investigate. So midrash is kind of the opposite of a literal surface meaning. Midrash is where you get to explore the different interpretations, different possibilities, different meanings of what a passage could be. So you have all of those three types of writings within the oral law. I'll say this again, not to make anybody feel stupid, but just to put us all on a level playing field. When we begin to read the oral law and to study the oral law, it is like trying to teach string theory or quantum physics to someone who just learned to add 2 and 2. And that's not because you're dumb or I'm dumb. It's because we're not practiced. Mark and I were talking before. service, and how many of you could run a marathon? Oh, I thought I saw a hand go up. I was gonna. Let me ask you this: how many of you could run? Period. Okay, I got like 2 hands. Okay, good. All right. You would not go like, tomorrow I'm gonna run a marathon, 26 miles or 26 whatever, however many, 0.4, whatever it is. You don't just start doing that. For many of us, we wouldn't even just start jogging. We'd have to start walking regularly, and then after a few weeks of that, then maybe we could start jogging for like 30 seconds with a minute break of walking, and then 30 seconds, and we'd have to work. It would take us a long time to even get up to where we could run for any length of time, right? This is the same way that we have to approach Bible study, and especially things like the oral law. You don't just jump into it and go like, well, I can read, and this is in English, so obviously I can understand how it works. Nay, it doesn't work that way. There are building blocks that you need in order to be able to do the whole thing. Bible study's the same way. It's just that you've all been lied to. You've all been lied to because you've said the Word of God, anybody can learn it and anybody can understand it. And while you can read the words on a page and comprehend what they say, to understand the original intent of it takes a lot more education and practice and skills than it just does because we're dealing with a translated message, a translated book. It's translated from what once was a dead language over thousands of years of history in a place that is one that we are not familiar with, and a culture and a history and all these things. We go like, oh, just read it. You'll understand it. It'll be fine. And so what we've done is like the meme with the dog where the house is on fire and he's like, it's fine. Everything is fine. We think we are interpreting and reading the Word of God in a really helpful way, and we don't know. And we've not been taught a systematic way of interpreting Scripture that takes in language and context, etc. We haven't all been giving the building blocks that it takes to do a really helpful job of interpreting Scripture. And so we don't even have a really good handle on that. Then we jumped into something like the oral law, and we go like, yeah, I can understand it. And when we read things that are disturbing to us, because there are disturbing things in it, then when we freak out and we don't know how to take it because we haven't been raised and taught in the way that it should go. So, among the works of what we call the oral Torah, or the oral Torah as a whole, there are 3 basic parts. I'm going to move babe, real quick. There are 3 basic parts. So, 3 major works or major parts of the oral law, okay? You have the Mishnah, right, which we hear a decent amount about. Then you have this work called the Tosefta, which nobody ever talks about. And then you have the mega boss, the big scary Talmud, right? Or Talmud if you're from some different places. And so we're going to talk about kind of how these things came to be real quick. Again, this is a quick and dirty history. You know how we in America, we have heroes, we have people, folklore, we have people in our country's past that you know, right? So if I were to say the name Davy Crockett, what's the first thing that happens? You start singing it. Davy Crockett, right? Because it's part of our cultural fabric, right? Some of you can't hear the name. Now it's going to be stuck in your head. You're welcome. You'll get nothing else from today's service, but you'll be driving home going, Davy, dang it. It's part of our cultural fabric. If you go to the land of Israel and you're like, hey, you're out having dinner one night with a bunch of, your new Jewish friends, and you go, hey, what about that Davy Crockett? They're going to be like, Say who now? And so you'd have to explain a ton of history and context to get them to understand why we sing songs about this guy named Davy Crockett. You with me so far? So I'm going to give you some names, and you're going to go, why in the world are these names important? I've never heard these names before. They don't matter to me. They're not part of my background or my history. But in the same way that we sing songs about Davy Crockett, these names I'm going to give you in the formation of Jewish life and of the oral Torah as a whole, these names they are the Davy Crockett's of the Jewish world. They are the George Washingtons of the Jewish world. They are the Abraham Lincolns, all right, the Neil Armstrongs of the Jewish world as far as renown goes. So, in the early 1st century of the Common Era, so we're talking about 1 AD, which is, Yeshua is just born or just, about to be born, or maybe is a few years old, just depending on how you date where 1 is, and there's a lot of controversy about that. You have these 2 huge schools of thought in Judaism, and they are both Pharisees. You have Beit Hillel, or the house of Hillel. You've heard me talk about this. You have Beit Shammai, the house of Shammai. They are both types of Pharisees, groups of Pharisees, right? So one immediate question that you should always think about is when Yeshua is talking to the Pharisees or about the Pharisees, which Pharisees is he talking about or talking to? Because we have 2 types, but actually there are way more than that. There's like 7 or 8 types. And so we have these 2 houses or 2 schools of thought. And they began to collect all these different halakot. So all these different ways of walking out the Torah, because maybe like up in the Galilee, remember you didn't have the internets. Al Gore hadn't blessed them with the internet yet. So was it Al Gore? Yeah. Okay. So you have the Galilee, right? The Galilee. You have Capernaum, and they have a little bit different way of keeping the Torah maybe than they do in Jerusalem, which is kind of like high society, right? And then down in the south, in the Negev, may be really different. And so you have these different traditions, and each little pocket of Israel has a different little custom, a different little way maybe of keeping certain commandments. And all of these things were done orally. They were passed on from their teachers down to the students, right? Like we've talked about. And so Hillel and Shammai and their students, they started to collect these little bits of halakot, of how these different people are walking out the Torah. And they were, of course, they were oral, they were handed down through the ages. And then they put them in several different types of collections, okay? With no uniformity, and there's no kind of really, condensation of everything yet. And then there's those are the first 2 names, Hillel and Shammai. Then another big name, the third name I want you to remember is Akiva, Rabbi Akiva. He's a super important foundational sage in the history of Israel. After the destruction of the temple of Beit HaMikdash, Rabbi Akiva starts to really compile these things and set a standard for all of these different traditions and different things that are happening. Why? Well, you remember we talked about the first temple, Solomon's temple. There were people alive going to Solomon's temple, worshiping Hashem at Solomon's temple, and then they got carried away into Babylonian exile, or they stayed in the land of Israel. The temple was destroyed. Later, when Ezra and Nehemiah and those came back and started to rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and put the temple back in action, there were some people that were still alive that had seen the first temple in process, in activation. And they could say, this is how it was done. This is how we used to do it. This is the way it's supposed to be done. Well, in 70, when Rome destroyed Jerusalem, Akiva and some of the other wise sages said, this is the end. There's not going to be any eyewitnesses, because we're not going to rebuild this anytime soon, because Rome devastated Jerusalem. And so in their wisdom, they said, we've got to take some of these kind of oral things that have just been passed down. We've got to write them down, or else we're going to lose them forever. So when the next temple will be built, or when Messiah does come, nobody's going to know what to expect because all of this wisdom is going to be lost, right? And so he began to standardize these things. He collected all the halakot and edited into two main works. One was a concise collection, so it was just the laws, just bang, 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 right? And the other one was an expanded version that had some explanation as to how those laws came to be. So you got Akiva. He takes all of these things that Hillel and Shammai had collected, and he separates them into two different works. One is very concise, and it's just the laws. It's just law after law after law after law. The other one has some explanation about how those laws came to be. Now, two of Rabbi Akiva's disciples take on and continue his work, okay? And I want to give you these names. So you have Rabbi Meir, M-E-I-R, and Rabbi Nehemiah, okay? Rabbi Meir, you can remember this because Meir, M, Mishnah. Rabbi Meir takes on the work of continuing the Mishnah. It's the concise version, okay? So the Mishnah is concise. If you've ever really looked at the Mishnah and you see how voluminous it is, you go, that's concise? Yeah, it is. The Tosefta is what we'll call expanded, okay? And this is Rabbi Nehemiah. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nehemiah. So are we good so far? We have Hillel and Shammai, then we have Akiva, then we have Meir and Nehemiah that take on and continue these works. Akiva did away with some of the discussions of how things were done. Again, that's how we have the Mishnah. So if the Mishnah doesn't give much information, that's why. So we have these two works. Rabbi Akiva dies, and his students take on the works. Rabbi Meir continues to expand and collect information, as does Rabbi Nehemiah. And then Rabbi Meir's work, the Mishnah, becomes the foundation for the final editing of the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, make sure the kids haven't drawn anything on here. Okay. So you have Hillel and Shammai. Okay. Then you have Rabbi Akiva. Then you have Rabbis Meir and Nehemiah. Then you have Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is a really important character, a really important person in Jewish history, because he's the last president of the Sanhedrin. He is called Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda, the president, or the prince of the Sanhedrin, and this is done in 200 CE or AD, when he finally finishes the Mishnah. So in the Mishnah, there are 6 major divisions of how the topics and the material is divided. There's 6 major divisions, and those are called seders. Or what does seder mean? Order, right? Those are seders. So you have 6 major seders in the Mishnah, and that is how all the information is divided. So you have seder. Let's see. Seder Zeraim is the first one. Seder Zeraim, Zerah, is seed. So this seder has everything to do with agricultural laws. Well, why are agricultural laws so important within Judaism, within Torah? Well, because the festivals revolve around agriculture, right? You have the barley harvest, you have the wheat harvest, you have the other species in Sukkot, etc. Israel is an agrarian society. Agriculture is a big deal. All over the Torah. Today in our Parsha, you had stuff about what fields were planted with seed, and that's a certain set apart and redemption, blah, 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 and all that stuff. Everything is rooted in agriculture. So the first Seder is Zeraim, is seeds. Underneath, inside the Seders, you have it broken down into further sections. The first section of Zeraim is one called Berachot. Berachot means blessings. So you know the blessing that we say on Kiddush, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kachadenu b'mitzvotav, right? That formula, you say that for a lot of things. You say it for hand washing, you say it for Kiddush, you say it for a lot of different things. All of those blessings, the blessings that are said every day in Jewish life, are contained or founded in that section of the Mishnah. So if you want to know, like, the Mishnah says we should bless God 100 times a day. Baruch atah Adonai, or Baruch Hashem. If you want some ideas about how to bless God, go read Berachot. And it'll give you all of these beautiful things about, like, Rabbi so-and-so says you should bless this and then that and the other, and it's wonderful, okay? After Zeraim, you have Seder Moed. Now, this is a cool one because look, we're all Christians, right? You might not call you, I'm not a Christian. Yeah, you are. We're all Christian, and that's not a bad thing, okay? We're just a different animal. It's okay. We come to the Torah and we go, oh, this is supposed to be a celebration. Shavuot says here it's supposed to be a celebration. Then we ask ourselves, but how do you do Shavuot? The Torah doesn't tell you. Well, it tells you to, like, bring bread and wave them before Adonai. And so, like, you could stand in front of the OAM building and face the east, and we could wave bread. I mean, but it's not a temple like it's supposed to be. And, like, I don't know anybody growing wheat or it has wheat ready to harvest this year. I mean, so we go like, well, we can't keep it like they did, like the Torah commanded us to. So what do? We have what equates to a church service. We have praise and worship, then we have a teaching, then we have some kind of commitment after, and some scripture reading, et cetera, because that's what we know. Did you know that there is a whole collection of writings in the Mishnah about how the festivals are kept? Now, it's not the most exciting thing you'll ever read. It's not like, it doesn't read like a comic book, but it's all the laws of how the festivals are kept in like 1st, 2nd century Israel. So it's still a pretty far, it's a hard, gap to cross culturally and time-wise. But it's there. There doesn't need to be any wringing hands about, well, we don't know how to keep the festivals. No, like, they wrote it all down. It's all there, and you can go read it. So after Seder Moed, we have after Seder Moed, we have Seder Nezakin. Nezakin means damages. I've told you before that, I think the biggest part of sin that we have to deal with is not necessarily the ways we sin against God, but it's the ways that we sin against each other. The way that we damage each other. And the Torah has a lot to say about if we damage our neighbor, our brother, whatever. Well, how is that stuff done? How is that stuff rectified? The Seder Nezakin gives you all the stuff about damages and about what to do, how to compensate, etc., etc. After Seder Nezakin, I missed one. Nashim, Seder Nashim, which means women. In the temple, you have Ezrat Nashim, the court of the women. In the Mishnah, you have Seder Nashim, which is all about women folk. If I can caution everyone, guys, don't start reading here, please, for the love of God and everything that is holy. Please don't start reading here, okay? Ladies, okay, guys, please don't. If you're going to read the oral law, this is not the place to jump in, okay, in Seder Nashim. Why would you want to anyway? It's all about women's stuff, okay? And it's detailed. Okay, very much so. So you know what, guys? Let's stick to agriculture. Let's stick to, damages and festivals. We can do all that stuff. Leave the women's stuff to the women's stuff, okay? To the women folk. And let them have their part of the Torah, you know what I mean? Let them preserve their part of the Torah. That would be fantastic. We'll talk about some more of Nashim later on. Then we have Nezakim, like we talked about. Then we have one called Kodashim. What is that? Holy things, right? You want to study on holiness? You take a look into Seder Kodashim. It will teach you some important things about holiness. And so the last one is Toharot, which means purifications, okay? So you have these 6 Seders, and then they are divided into tractates. And then the tractates, there are a total of 63 tractates in the entire Mishnah. They are divided into chapters and into paragraphs, and each paragraph is called a Mishnah or a halakha. So that is the basic foundational part of the oral law, is the Mishnah. It is ground zero, okay? Now again, in order to study the Mishnah, you have to have some education about what it is, how it operates, et cetera, right? And so, there's a warning in Judaism, or a prohibition in Judaism. Jews are not allowed to study the oral law alone. They're prohibited from doing so. They require a teacher. And you know what? After fielding some questions from people throughout the years who have just gone off on their own and started reading, they just kind of went like, well, I don't have a book right here, but they just kind of went like, here it is, and I'm going to read here. Please, again, for the love of all that's holy, don't do that. Because there's a good chance you're going to find the one part that makes your stomach turn. You go like, how could this be in a holy book? Or it's taught by holy men, right? It's just part of the deal. And on that, let me just say real quick, we hold these sages to such a high standard as non-Jews, and we go like, if they say anything we don't like, we're not reading the rest of their stuff. They didn't even believe in Jesus anyway. You know who wasn't a super great guy and also didn't believe in Jesus, that we read literally every week? This guy named King David. What do you mean he didn't believe in Jesus? Well, Jesus wasn't around yet. Would he have if he was? We don't know. But you know what? He wasn't a super great guy. I mean, he was good at repentance. Let's give him credit where credit's due. But if you look back on the history of David, not the model of ethical behavior. And yet we read his stuff constantly. We quote it. We live by it. We sing it. And yet we read some of the things that these rabbis are discussing, which are in a different sphere of understanding, and we go like, don't like it, can't believe they said it, out the window with it, right? So I'm just letting you know there are some things in these writings that are hard to read, that things that are talked about that are difficult, but we have to approach it with a little bit of a broader understanding and take what we can use and leave the rest. That's okay. That's okay. You listen to people all the time that have bad moral character but have good advice. You ever take good advice from somebody who's not exactly the most morally upright? It happens, folks. So we have these Seders in the Mishnah, and then basically what we have is the Tosefta that is expanded a little bit, gives a little more detail as to how some of these decisions were made and things. And then we have the Talmud. In my last 2 minutes, I want to talk about the Talmud really quick. So the Talmud is a big beast, and I'm not going to do it justice in 2 minutes. But what is the Talmud? So the Talmud is really simple. It is the Mishnah. Sorry, that's not the way I want to do that. The Talmud is the Mishnah. I know this is hard for y'all to read. I'm sorry. The Mishnah, I didn't spell that right, plus something called Gemara or Gemara. That's what the Talmud is. So when you're reading the Talmud in Sepharia, everything is in one column, which makes it kind of hard to do this. But if you're reading it in a book, you open up a book of the Talmud, what you're going to see is in the middle of the page, usually, you're going to have the Mishnah. It's this. It's the Mishnah, quoted right out of the Mishnah. And then all around that page, you're going to have this stuff called Gemara. Gemara is rabbinic discussion on that Mishnah. And what you're going to have is some rabbi saying, well, this is how I think this Mishnah should be done. This is how we do it. This is how Rabbi so-and-so said to do it. And it's this lengthy legal discussion about how things pertaining to that Mishnah should be done. And the beautiful thing about the Talmud is that they record all the discussion. They record it all. So there's going to be some wacky stuff that you read in the Talmud because they were good enough to record even the stupid stuff, even the nasty stuff, even the offensive stuff. If Rabbi so-and-so said X, Y, Z and everybody went, they put it in there. And you know what happens most of the time? The other rabbis go, that was stupid. We're not doing that. They record all sides of the discussion. Sometimes they will give you an answer. This is the way it is to be done. But most of the time, they don't. They just go, here's the debate, and we're moving on. And so as a reader, as a studier of it, you have to go, well, like, what? Then how do we know what happened? Well, that's where we go to Jewish history. There may be something that's very offensive or something that's very hard for us to understand, and we go, there's no way this is what Judaism could do or could stand for. And you look through Jewish history and see if there's ever a record of that thing being done like that. And if there's no record of it, that means that what you just read was some rabbi's opinion, and it was never carried out. In other words, it wasn't decided that that was the consensus. It was just an opinion in the library of opinions, if that makes sense. And so that's what the Gemara is. It's stories, it's parables, it's all these different things that relate to the Talmud. Now, again, I'm not doing this justice, but this is a basic breakdown of the oral Torah, of what it is, of how it functions a little bit. We could spend much more time on this. There are two versions of the Talmud. There is a Talmud what's called Bavli, or the Babylonian Talmud, and the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud. Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian, was written, of course, in Babylon, or mostly written in Babylon. The Talmud Yerushalmi was written most in Jerusalem in the land of Israel. And so that's a real quick and dirty kind of overview of what the oral law is, how it's broken up, et cetera, et cetera. If you have any more questions on about the makeup of it or whatever, we can talk about it after or talk about it later. Next week, what I want to do, though, is I want to address one huge elephant in the room, and we may talk about a couple others depending on how much time we have. But I want to talk Jesus in the Talmud, or Yeshua in the Talmud, because there's all kind of claims. I won't tell you if they're erroneous or not. We'll talk about that next week. But there's claims about, well, the Talmud says that Yeshua is boiling in feces, and it says that his mother Mary was a whore, and it says all these things. There's all these things that the Torah says about Yeshua, and we want to investigate that to see from Jewish sources what Jewish sources say about who they're talking about. And so we want to tackle that. So we'll do that next week, and maybe a couple of other controversial parts. We'll see kind of how we go time-wise, and then we'll begin moving into observance. Cool? Amen.